I've come up with a new form of dualism that I call evo-dualism. It hinges on something we all experience, the present moment, where I'm going to claim the physical and the mental overlap. What I'll be saying is I imagine that early in life's evolution, chromosomes, long molecules of DNA and RNA in our cells, became intelligent enough to qualify for access to that present moment. All the rest of mind and consciousness grew out of that, as life took advantage of what could happen in the present moment. I divide this into two videos. This one is about where consciousness came from, how it evolved. The second one is about what consciousness is like. First, life itself had to evolve. Here's my quick 3-step sketch of how that happened. Step 1. Join me on the early Earth in a deep ocean vent. Colossal flows of energy surge up from the planet's interior past walls of clay. These flows will induce into existence anything that will dissipate that heat faster. Imagine the clay wall becoming permeated by networks of chimneys, speeding the energy up and away. The inside surfaces of these chimneys become covered in tiny engines, drawing on chemicals in the clay like little thermostats to protect the clay surface and further speed the flow of heat. Step 2. As the torrent of energy drives ever greater efficiencies, certain chemicals take on specialized roles within these little engines. We get amines, lipids, carbohydrates, metals combining. These engines form primitive equivalents of memory, switches, logic gates like miniature computers. Step 3. Further up the chimneys, as the heat dissipates, these tiny machines turn to dispersing the heat further by finding ways to duplicate themselves and send their energy-rich progeny up and out of the chimneys into the wider world, where they can tap into other sources of energy, such as iron turning into rust and light streaming from the sun. Over aeons, one variety comes to dominate, a combination of RNA, proteins, lipids, ATP, etc. In these little machines, RNA and DNA take on two roles. First, as a long linear string, a chromosome, they code for all the intelligence implicit in a creature. Then by splitting into two copies, that intelligence duplicates itself. The creature divides into daughter cells, each with its own copy. Each draws on its intelligence to grow a new whole creature. That's my quick sketch of how bacteria and later archaea evolved. Tiny single-celled creatures still around today. It's at this point I see mind beginning. It takes the form of a present moment. To help me picture this for you, imagine graphing the life of such a creature through time as a succession of instants. Represent each instant as a vertical line and place them next to one another to make up a sheet of events ending in the present. In the physical world, events succeed one another as determined by the laws of physics, so you can imagine the sheet continuing into the future. The creature's progress already laid out. Its future is determined because events in the physical world are entirely predictable, driven by the laws of physics. Now, go back to the present. Imagine a second sheet starting here and continuing along parallel to the first. Notice two things about this second sheet. First, It's very narrow, just 1 second of time, and it's blank. There's nothing written on it yet. That's the present moment. What made this possible? Let me guess. Part of it could be chromosomes became so complex, embodying so much intelligence that they could form the concept if. This would be entirely new. In a purely physical world, the concept if couldn't exist. Everything there happens as determined by physical laws. Being capable of asking if brought the present moment into existence. And why that's special is, first, it's up to the creature's chromosome what gets written in the present moment, and what it writes can bleed over to influence what's happening on the other sheet, changing what physically happens. The two sheets can influence one another. They can interact. The rest of evolution will be about the uses living creatures made of that precious present moment. Let's follow that in another 5 steps. Step 1. Chromosomes began adapting to having a present moment where they could ask if questions by writing into themselves models of themselves, of things happening in the environment, of their own biochemistry. Impressions floating off these models could combine to become questions. Chromosomes developed memory where they could capture what was happening in their present moment and make models of them too. This is one explanation for why chromosomes grew so long. Chromosomes growing so long tells us this process was underway. It tells us chromosomes were beginning to think. At this point, I'm going to divide my chromosome into 2. The chromosome, along with all its genes and models, I'll continue to call the chromosome. That's the physical part. The mind it was developing, that it's thinking for it, I'll refer to as the genome. So by genome, I'll mean the chromosome's mind. By chromosome, I'll mean the genome's brain. Genome equals mind. Now, a genome could ask, what would happen if I had my creatures joined together to form a hollow ball? If daughter cells could break off and grow inside the ball, eventually breaking out as new adults. And we get Volvox. What would I become if I could have a synthesizing cell grow inside me to feed me? We get algae. I'm talking about chromosomes as if they came equipped with memories and models enough to be thought of as minds. If you want clues to how this could be possible, read Junk DNA by Nessa Carey. I'll repeat that in the description. It's amazing what's being discovered about DNA. Step 2. Every so often the Earth would go through convulsions such as vast volcanic activity or the Earth being blanketed by ice. Each time, many kinds of creatures went extinct. And each time, life took these crises as opportunities to create new kinds of living creatures. Midway through the Earth's history, through a remarkable feat of imagination, genomes dreamed up a new, much more complicated kind of creature, the eukaryotic cell. New kinds of creatures could now consist of many cells joined together, such as jellyfish and sponges. And cells could now specialize, so nerve cells appear, at first scattered randomly over creatures' bodies, as in Hydra, then in nets connecting particular senses to particular organs or muscles, as in sea slugs. Such astonishing creatures appearing meant genomes were developing much greater mental powers. Step 3. After a further crisis, chromosomes themselves went through a revolution. They began building a new model into themselves, of themselves as creators of models. Their genomes became self-aware. They could know themselves as minds. They could make up new models whenever they wanted. They became conscious. They could think creatively. Step 4. Once genomes became conscious and creative, the Earth saw new creatures we label Ediacaran. Then came the Cambrian explosion with a sudden flourish of dramatically new kinds of creatures, including all the major groups of large creatures we know today. Sex limited reproduction to within individual species, turning them into silos where evolution could proceed more rapidly. Nerve cells coagulated into brains. Genomes had been embedding some of their intelligence into their creatures all along, but now they could give them some of their own mental abilities. With creatures' mental systems now controlled by brains, they could be thrown into distinct body awareness states to ready them for appropriate action that, with consciousness, could be experienced as feelings, such as anxiety, fear, boldness, hunger. Step 5. So we're up to living creatures about to become conscious. For this to happen, the two hemispheres of a creature's brain had to specialize. The right hemisphere was where the models lived and where new models were formed. Forming a model for itself as a model maker made itself aware. First, it began to experience consciousness while dreaming, then in humans while awake. Meanwhile, the left hemisphere was developing language. For what happens next, I refer you to Julian Jaynes' book, The Origin of Consciousness, in the breakdown of the bicameral mind, noted in the description. Jaynes traces how conscious experience appeared in around 3000 BC in the earliest city civilizations. First, the left and right hemispheres learned to communicate with one another through individuals self-hypnotizing themselves by staring at statues with large jewels for eyes that appeared to speak to them. Through this, the left hemisphere got access to the right hemisphere's wisdom. Bound up in its models, the right hemisphere learnt to speak. By around 2000 BC, the two hemispheres had begun to speak to one another directly, without needing to gaze at a statue. Around 1000 BC, we developed alphabetic writing that let us record our trains of thoughts as they flowed through the present moment so others could follow. Around 500 BC, the axial period, individuals were able to speak out their new wisdom, leading to waves of consciousness spreading out over ancient civilizations. Solon and Socrates in ancient Greece, Confucius and Lao Tse in China, the Buddha in India. By 2000 years ago, our kind of consciousness emerged in ancient Rome and spread across the Roman Empire. The Arabian Peninsula got its axial figure in Muhammad. In the Americas, rulers were still consulting statues when the Spaniards arrived, bringing with them consciousness in the form of the Christian soul. In Europe, rebirth of ancient Greek and Roman thought led to widespread rationality and modern science. Essentially, I've suggested how mind originated, with life getting access to the present moment. From there, as genomes figured out how to take advantage of it, mind developed further, as we can trace by how creatures responded to their environment with increasingly adaptive behavior. In a second video titled Consciousness 2, I'll go into what the present moment is like, how it's different from what's physical, as we can learn from our own experience of it from the inside.